Hello everyone, during this video we'll be working on, well, adding a few more tools to our clay car shop, including a crane and, well, a few workbenches.
Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well, and thank you for tuning into Moose Motion. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new, and be sure you have your post notifications turned on so you don't miss any of the new content. Anyway, thank you for your support, it's highly appreciated.
So we're going to start off this video with, well, playing with a lot of oven clay, because that's what these tools are primarily going to be made out of. Seeing how this stuff basically turns into a nice hard surface, it only kind of makes sense to make tools out of them for the little clay car shop. Well, first we're going to start off by making a couple, well, workbenches here, because, well, that would be definitely handy to have some, well, extra surface areas to put a few of the car parts on while I'm working on the car, instead of just kind of placing them miscellaneously throughout the table. Not only that, this is, well, basically going towards a set as well. These will all be future props for my little actual car garage, where these little clay cars will essentially be worked on in a stop motion format. So we're kind of in the process of essentially building the shop as well as all the cars for this future series, so that's why things are taking a little bit longer than usual. Unfortunately, I'm a bit behind schedule with this video post. I like to try and post at least once a week. However, this crane took a little bit longer than expected, so that's generally kind of why I was a little behind with the post, as well as you can tell the video size is a little larger. Plus, I had to do a whole bunch of engineering to, well, kind of figure out what I would do for future, well, steering capabilities for the Skyline, and I've now come up with a few different concepts. So the next video we'll be working on will be back on the little Skyline project, essentially making those front wheels actually spin and turn, and finishing up basically that entire project after that. And if you would like to see more on the, well, the clay cars as well as other animations, be sure to check out the links in the post description. Anyway, let's focus on the task at hand here. We are currently building a couple workbenches, a basically normal workbench, as well as a fabrication table. Now, most of the inside parts of this table, or tables, are basically made out of wood due to, well, it kind of saves on material and keeps things a little bit lighter and stronger as well. And then just wrapping it up in a nice clay, well, layer, nice and thin, because essentially it doesn't exactly necessarily need to be there. The big reason I'm covering it up with clay is because, well, once you paint wood, the wood grain still kind of sticks through, and, well, clay doesn't obviously have that same effect. So therefore, kind of covering everything up with clay makes things a little easier for paint wise, and you can add future little details on it to, like, sculpt, say, future holders and various other tools on it as well. Because, well, this is probably just, well, part one of, well, many different tools we'll be making in the future for our little clay car shop. So if you have any suggestions on what would be, well, handy, pun intended, for the little clay car shop in the future, I know I've had a suggestion to make a car lift, which is definitely on the list. That'd be very cool, but definitely a big task. I'll have to make sure I have the appropriate amount of materials and other various things that are probably going to be needed to do that task. I'm probably thinking Lego would be probably a good solution for that. However, I don't exactly want it to look like it's a piece of Lego. We'll probably use the gears and do a lot of kit bashing for that project, but at any rate, be sure to keep your eyes peeled for Milton the Moose while you're here, and if you're unfamiliar with who that is, he's the little moose character, essentially, who's kind of the mascot for this channel, and if you timestamp correctly when he shows up during the video, you will have your comment pinned at the top of the comment section, as well as get a shout out in the next how-to series, so good luck, dear viewer. And quick shout out to Epic Tiger HD, who seems to be the top contender for spotting Mr. Milton. He's got definitely a sharp pair of eyes, so for any of you who are perhaps competing, be sure to keep, well, your post notifications turned on and trying to get there before Mr. HD does, because that guy's got, well, the eye of the tiger, apparently. So good for you, Mr. Tiger. Anyway, we are just about finished the actual workbenches here, just kind of fixing up some of the high and low spots. Now that the actual fabrication table kind of has a set of legs, we are also going to add a pair of gussets to that one as well, just for added strength, because, well, it's not quite as sturdy as, well, those big blocks of wood we used on just the regular workbench in comparison to the fab table. And for those of you who are unaware what a gusset is exactly, don't be too ashamed. It's more or less a fabrication term. Essentially, it's a little brace or an angle brace in between usually a 90-degree well, angle from one part to another just to kind of give things a little bit more stability. And now we're going to move on, apparently, to painting things up and making it a nice gray color, so therefore it looks like steel. Seeing how this is just kind of, well, the workbench, we'll just kind of get that one out of the way quickly and then move back onto the fab table, making the little gussets that I was just, well, explaining to you. So for this, we're just going to use, again, some armature wire and do a bunch of cutting and make things basically the same shape, then wrap it up in oven clay and then wedge it in between the actual leg and the table part there, just giving it a little bit more support. And then once all of that is done, we'll obviously paint it up the same color as the actual workbench, and then we can move on to the, well, more exciting part of this video, building a mini engine crane out of clay, which was definitely the most time-consuming part and kind of set me behind schedule, along with trying to figure out what I was going to do for, well, future steering capabilities for the Skyline. But at any rate, I think it was kind of worth the extra time investment because the crane does look pretty cool, plus the tables will definitely come in handy. Nowhere near as cool as the crane, but at any rate, we are now at the crane part. So let's get on with it. We are going to basically kind of construct this thing mostly out of armature wire, as well as oven-baked clay, which is not exactly probably the most sturdiest thing out there, but given the aesthetic of the claymation environment, it's probably best to just kind of stick everything to the similar material, so that way it kind of gives it that added character and handmade feel. So once all the armature wire pieces are cut out for each individual part, then we're going to essentially wrap each part in, well, clay and basically judge the thickness accordingly to what the part is essentially going to be. For example, the boom and the jib, essentially you want to be, well, a little thicker because that's going to be the part that's doing, well, a brunt of the lifting, as well as the base frame. And, well, for those of you who aren't familiar with crane terms, the boom is essentially the main part or the base part of the crane, and the jib is the part where essentially is the kind of joint area, and that is the part that essentially jacks up and moves around and lifts the things. And for the support legs, you obviously kind of want to make those a little thinner so that way you're not taking up too much space once the crane is completely outfolded. Now, I have a engine crane actually in my own personal garage, so it's this one's very strongly based off that crane essentially. And I like how the fact that my crane essentially can fold up and be put neat in the corner when it's not being used, so I essentially based this design off the same concept, so that way when the crane is not in use, you can basically take the legs, fold them up, and hang them off the process in the crane. I have a kind of suggestion when it comes to oven-baked clay. I would recommend not drilling the hole in while the clay is actually soft. I use a Sculpting brand oven-baked clay, which I've had tremendous success with thus far. Only at this point I've noticed I had a cracking incident with the hole basically being drilled in as a fault point, and it kind of unfortunately did crack, and I was able to at least put it back together. It wasn't too bad. However, I probably should have drilled the hole for the actual pin for the crane probably after it was baked in the oven as opposed to doing it ahead of time. So that's just a little lesson for everybody else. Well, learn from my mistake. So yeah, do as I say, not as I do here. And for this next part here, we're essentially adding a little sleeve onto the jib of the crane. So this is essentially a feature that's pretty popular amongst a lot of engine cranes in particular, where essentially you have a pin and a bunch of holes where you can set the lift point where, well, it's set for different essentially weight restrictions. And in this case, it's going to be a little too complicated to make, so we're just kind of putting it there for aesthetic purposes. So it looks like it's there, but it's not going to actually be able to really, adjust at that point. We don't really need it to for the small little clay engines that this thing's going to be lifting in particular. Now for the wheels on this particular project, I decided not to go really full into detail and make them actual functioning wheels. Mainly due to, well, if I'm ever going to do any stop motion scenes with this thing, I don't want wheels for the purpose of that they like to roll around, and that's just not a stable surface to really work with and can cause, well, unwanted jankiness during your animation. So I essentially just did some, well, round pegs that basically can have sticky tack attached to the bottom of them, ensuring that the crane's not going to be moving around while it's lifting things during the animation process. Because technically this is a armature doll engine crane, which is kind of an odd concept, but for the, well, series and things that I do, I guess it's not that particularly strange. It kind of makes sense. So these little parts on the base frame here are essentially going to be little channel parts for the actual legs of the crane. So we're just going to gently press the actual legs in there, so that way in the future they can have little pins attached to them. And then basically, you know, the little legs just get stuck onto the actual channel piece, creating a little bit more support when you're lifting things. So now we're going to make a small little hydraulic pump. Now obviously this isn't going to be a real life functioning hydraulic pump because it's, well, made of oven baked clay. So the idea to make this thing essentially work during the stop motion process is we're going to have different actual lengths of, well, hydraulic jack. So essentially what you will be doing with the crane is replacing each one of these little pegs here frame by frame, therefore lifting the engine up little by little. So the chain part of this is actually quite easy and fairly clever if I don't say so myself. Essentially all you really need is an old necklace and just cut out different lengths that you will essentially need for different parts of the crane. And then essentially just sculpt or glue different parts into the chain accordingly. Now we're going to make a couple little quick hooks out of armature wire, which will essentially be the actual hanging mechanism for, well, the legs, so that way we can fold this crane up nice and neatly in the corner when it is not in use. Now it is time to give it a little bit of color, which is one of my personal favorite steps about building these things, because it basically goes from looking like a odd-shaped piece of clay to, well, actually looking like a legitimate engine crane or tool at this point. And for that, I decided I would just go with a nice bright red color and black, just so that way it kind of matches the same aesthetic as the actual engine stand that's obviously over there supporting the little RB26 from the Skyline project. And well, that's going to bring this project to a close at this point. Definitely adds a little bit more aesthetic to the actual clay shop environment. It's starting to look, well, a little bit more like an actual car shop. I would like to thank you for sticking around to the very end of the video, and, well, if you haven't already, be sure to smack that like button, leave a comment what you think of the project below, or any suggestions for future tools, and perhaps consider subscribing if you're new, and if you're already a subscriber, be sure you have your post notifications turned on so you don't miss any of the new content, and if you'd like to stay up to date in between videos, be sure to check out the social media links in my post description below. Anyway, that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy.